Hey everybody, welcome back to Sweatpants BI. It's me, Sean, here. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart, and it is just some broad guidelines around designing more effective data visuals. The reason that I wanted to put this video together was because I have a lot of people who reach out to me on LinkedIn who are at different stages in their learning journey with regard to business intelligence, data visualization, and they just kind of want some pointers. Like, what are some things that I need to keep in mind when I'm designing my first Power BI reports so that I know my data visuals are on point? And of course, my wife Nina is also going through her own learning journey right now with Power BI. She's coming to me with all kinds of questions around, hey, I've got a couple of different versions of this data visual that I'm working on. Which one is most effective? Which one works better? And so that just kind of got me thinking, what are some of the things that I ask myself or that I keep in mind that I apply to all of my Power BI reports when I'm building to make sure that my data visuals are as effective and as impactful as they can be. And so I ended up coming up with a list of 10 tips and tricks that you can sort of build into your Power BI tools, most of these regardless of where you are in your own BI learning journey, so that you can create the most effective data visuals possible. So let's go ahead and jump into it for this top 10. So the most important aspect of a data visual that I often see people neglect is the title. Power BI will automatically create titles from the data fields and measures that you drop into a data visual, but these titles are often vague and frankly, they're just not very helpful. So they're a total missed opportunity. The reason that descriptive titles are important is that a good title immediately contextualizes why the data visual is important in the first place. It can contextualize the visual against broader company objectives, and it even has the power to make users care about the visual that we're showing them. So a good title coupled with other visualization tricks like conditional formatting that you see here, and I even added a line that just kind of represents the $5 million goal for this hypothetical company. It just helps users immediately figure out what they're supposed to take away from a data visual that you're showing them. The next most important thing that we want to focus on when creating great data visuals is getting rid of everything that we don't need or anything that distracts from the most important data points. So, famed data visualization expert Edward R. Tufte popularized the phrase chart junk to describe all of the unnecessary elements that can make data visuals cluttered and just difficult to read. So honestly, even I would probably be ruthlessly skewered by ET for some of the more artistic data visualization flourishes that I build into a lot of my reports, things like these gradients. And, obviously there's a lot of aesthetic elements here that I present because I'm trying to run a YouTube channel, not because I'm too concerned with designing, just the bare bones data visuals that he would probably recommend. But the key takeaway is that we want to streamline our data visuals as much as possible by removing unnecessary colors like you see in these columns over here. We want to get rid of unnecessary axis labels. We want to get rid of all redundant chart elements in order to help users consume the data that you're presenting more efficiently and more quickly. So you can definitely see, there are just so many fewer elements that our brains have to process in this visual on the right compared to the one on the left, even though they are made of exactly the same pieces. But you can see over here on the left, there are all kinds of unnecessary uses of color. We have data labels that are distracting because they're carried out to all 5 digits in this case instead of just at the thousands place. And of course, there are distracting backgrounds because we're also trying to make sure that people can read against all of these different colors. Whereas if we just eliminate all the unnecessary colors here, everything else on the right sort of falls into place. And so let's really focus on that color concept for a moment, because color is where I see so many new data professionals really struggle as they start their data viz journeys. Honestly, I even see people that are fairly seasoned data visualization people making a lot of mistakes when it comes with color, because honestly, color is where we start to get into some more aesthetic and stylistic elements that demand a little bit more artistry. It's easy for me to say, that these are the elements that make up good uses of color, but there's definitely a sort of innate component to it as well. That's in the eye of the beholder. Colors that look extremely garish to me maybe don't look as terrible to someone else. But finding a great color palette is it's a real challenge for anyone, especially people that don't have the eye for that sort of thing. So I'll be revisiting that topic in a future video. Just know that color is a pretty complex issue, and there are a whole lot of things that you have to balance. However, if you minimize your use of color and be comfortable, using shades of gray for less important data elements, you'll find that you have fewer chances to mess up. Colors often appear most distracting and unappealing when they're presented alongside other conflicting colors. And so if you set a goal to only use one or two colors in your reporting, then you only have to worry about balancing, the stylistic appeal of two colors instead of, like dozens. So be very deliberate in your use of color and be okay using gray for the inevitable parts of your report and parts of your data visuals that are less important, that are just kind of there for comparison's sake. Using color should really be your last resort, just because it's so important and has such a huge impact on your users and how they consume your data visuals. The next thing that I want to focus on is readability. And for this tip, I'm going to just go ahead and put on my cranky old man hat for a moment, because this is something that really speaks to my soul. Please consider the overall readability of your report before releasing them into the wild. When presenting data labels and numbers, make sure that they are formatted correctly with dollar signs and commas where appropriate, so that users can easily compare numbers. I mean, note how much more difficult it is to compare the top number here with the bottom number here than it is to compare 16.6 million with 1.96 million. Here the comparison is instantaneous. Here, I would honestly, I don't know if I would immediately recognize that there is one fewer digit in this number compared to this number. Call me simple. I just think that, basic formatting makes all the difference in the world for making it easier and faster for me to consume the information in a visual. So just a huge pet peeve for me. But the focus here is that you should remember that the goal of readability is to make life easier for your users. It is not about you. And it's also an accessibility matter. When you're presenting numbers and text in your report, you should always make sure that you have appropriate contrast. In other words, that you don't have colored text on colored backgrounds that really just don't work, or that make your text more difficult to read. You should make sure that you have picked a sufficiently large font size so that your users will not have to squint or strain their vision to read what you're showing them. Trust me, your users are going to be extremely grateful if you just make all the numbers and all the text on your report as easy to read as possible. The next tip is to remember that context is always king. So, when you're improving your data visuals, it's important to stay laser focused on what matters most. And just because you've created a very clean looking, highly readable data visual doesn't mean that you've succeeded if the visual doesn't address the business question that needs answering. So, for example, if you find yourself creating a time series chart like I'm presenting here, ask yourself, what does the user really need to know about this visual? Are we interested in understanding, whether or not 2021 sales lagged behind 2020 sales, or are we comparing them? Because the chart on the left makes it a lot more difficult to determine how 2021 sales compare against 2020 sales. Glancing at this visual, I can tell that it does look like, sales over here may be less than sales over here. But it's so much easier for me to compare those trends if I break them out separately, like I'm doing over here on the right, where I'm creating cumulative sales measures for 2020 and 2021. And if I want my users to understand the extent of any year-over-year decline, I can add additional emphasis to the 2021 sales line by using like a brighter color so that users can plainly see the deficit over time between the 2 years. And if I even want to get more fancy, I can write something like a calculated measure and tie that to my title options on the chart, so that I can explain, capture within the chart itself the extent of that delta, which in this case, it looks like sales in 2021 declined by 26.6%, resulting in a loss of $867,704. So, the chart on the left makes me, when I'm asking myself the question of whether or not sales are falling behind, the chart on the left makes me say maybe, maybe it's not exactly clear to me, but it looks like maybe sales are down. Whereas the chart on the right makes me think, holy crap, we're in trouble and we've got to act right now. So if I were in the head of sales for this company, I would definitely want that call to action as soon as possible. And the way that we're presenting this figure over here on the right, with a whole bunch of additional context and presenting the exact same information, but in a manner that makes it much easier to compare the actual performance between the 2 years. It does a much better job of sort of eliciting that call to action, which is ultimately the point of business intelligence. The next tip is around, how do we use different, visualization and formatting elements to really hook the user's attention. So basically, we want to combine the different design tricks that we've already discussed up to this point so that we can, take the user's attention and pull them directly to the part of the visual where they should be looking. So as mentioned, a good title can help set the stage for what a user should expect to see in a visual. So for example, if maybe the question is, which football position pays the highest on average? That's a pretty good title, but we want to help the user get the answer to that question right out of the gate. So in the case of the visual on the left, yes, it's pretty easy to, go through all 11 of these items, and compare them so that we can, quickly, get to the answer. Looks like second forward is the position that pays the highest average, pays the highest salary on average. But there's still, we still have to go through here and just manually kind of eyeball the entire visual in order to sort of get to the point. Whereas in the visual on the right, it takes us straight to the question's answer without any guesswork involved by simply using a different, brighter color, in this case, white, and making the size of that item much larger than others in the chart. So by deploying some formatting differences just to the most important element of this data visual, we're able to really pull the user's attention to that second forward item. And then if our users want to go back and compare the other data points afterwards, they've got all the time in the world to do that, but only after we've made them see what they were supposed to see first. Everything else is just kind of there for them to compare after the fact. So don't be afraid to use, special formatting options on the parts of your data that matter most. It's okay to let some things sort of fall to the background by formatting the less important items the same. But it's all contextual. It all depends on what question you're trying to answer. And if you don't know the question that you're trying to answer, well, then you should probably be asking yourself whether the data visual is relevant or important for your report in the first place. Similarly, an important concept for building more effective data visuals in the context of a BI report is to take a moment to carefully consider the overall composition of your report. If some visuals go together because they maybe contain a common measure, it might make sense to place all of those visuals together. So if you worked for a company that sells lots of vehicles, maybe your company is all across the country, they sell tons of vehicles, and your company is interested in knowing how sales are advancing for the past month, it's not enough to just build a bar chart showing sales over time. You're also going to want to anticipate the follow-up questions that your users are going to have regardless of how sales are doing. If sales are up, if sales are down, your users are probably going to want to know, well, which specific vehicles are driving whatever trend we're seeing in sales. Obviously, when we're talking about things that are drivers of data, in this context, we're setting ourselves up for some pretty advanced statistical analysis, but for the sake of simplicity, all I'm really talking about here is, maybe the users want to know, okay, sales look like they're going up quite a bit. That's a good thing. But do we know, which manufacturers are driving those increases in sales? Do we know which vehicle types? So if you know that your user base is likely to have some shared questions, to follow up on anything that you tell them about how sales have been progressing in the last 30 days, then you might want to just present those visuals all together, so that if as the user, for example, selects a specific date here, then they can immediately see, which manufacturers were selling the most vehicles on that day and which vehicle types, so that they have at least a sense that, okay, a lot of our business seems to be coming from these manufacturers, and these vehicle types seem like they're also, most popular among our current customer base. Something else that I see, users running into all the time are problems with the Power BI legends that are built directly into the tool. And so, my advice is, if you are designing a visual and you're running into problems with the legends that are built into Power BI, for example, you are seeing like some items being cut off here, or maybe you have so many categories that the user actually has to click through them within the legend, and that kind of creates a bad experience. This is just one example, but you can easily create your own legend in a tool like PowerPoint. I would imagine even, like Photoshop, if that's a thing that you have installed on your computer. And then you can just export those custom legends that you've designed as images, like I'm doing here. This is just an image that I built in PowerPoint, exported and imported into Power BI. And then you can sort of, get a lot more creative with your legends. I, long time ago, grew very, very frustrated with how limited my options were in presenting legends alongside my data. Sometimes I felt like I was very restricted to, only using legends a certain way. For example, in my conditions in the actual data set, I have all kinds of options here that barely have any data in them. So they're included in my legend, even though they're really not all that important. And instead of just excluding them, I ended up creating my own gradient legend that basically just tells users, hey, for this chart, if you see something that is in kind of this purple tone, it means that those vehicles are in, less acceptable condition. And if you see something that is in darker shades of blue, those indicate vehicles that are in newer or more pristine condition. So I found that, just creating a very simple legend for this specific example of a chart, and kind of bringing my own legend to this report was actually much more effective than using the tools that Power BI provides, even though these are probably going to cover most of your bases, a pretty huge amount of the time. The next aspect of data visualization in Power BI that immediately tells me if someone is less experienced in data viz is when I see reports that are just chock full of pie charts. Black. Even a pie chart that is executed reasonably well, like the example in the top left corner here that shows total inventory by manufacturer, would be improved by simply being converted to a bar chart, simply because the length of bars in a column chart are just inherently easier for the human mind to compare than the proportions that are carved out of a circle. And please, please, please never make a pie chart or donut chart for any data field that has more than 3 or 4 values. I am begging you. Cluttered, busy pie charts, like the example in the bottom left corner here, are not just hideous and impossible to read, they also take up a ton of space for the amount of value that they actually present. So, by and large, bar charts are almost always going to be a safer, easier to read alternative to pie charts. I cannot stress that enough. I hate it when I get a Power BI report from someone on my team that has ugly pie charts on them. I immediately have those converted to bar charts, and it always ends up being much more effective. That said, I am going to break my own rule a little bit and maybe differ with some of the data visualization establishments who would tell you that you should never use a donut chart. I have kind of a soft spot for donut charts on 2 conditions. If the field that you are visualizing has, maybe 3 to 5 categories, or if in particular, if you are using binary data to visualize, I'm talking like yes, no survey data in particular, where it's really easy to sort of visualize how the different respondents replied because there are really only two options. So for the kind of yes, no survey data, I use donut charts all the time because it's just really, really easy to sort of make that visual comparison between whether or not more people said yes or no, to specific questions. I also prefer pie charts or prefer donut charts far and beyond over pie charts because that additional gap that you have in the middle here, it does allow you to add some additional context, such as, in this example, total inventory by manufacturer. This at least tells us, for all of these proportions that are broken out here, what is the larger number or larger context from which these proportions are being carved out. So pie charts are fairly irredeemable in my respect, but donut charts are not without their charm if you're using them in the most effective manners that you can, like that I just outlined here. And the last data visual tip that I have for you today is to please avoid 3D charts. And in Power BI, fortunately, your options are few and far between. You're probably not going to be creating a lot of 3D charts unless you figure out ways to get pretty creative. But I would say you should avoid 3D pie charts like pie charts because they can be difficult to compare and even misleading depending on how they're oriented. Since it's much more difficult to compare 3D elements because you have to compare these data elements across multiple planes instead of just one in most data visuals. So unless your name is James Cameron, who in my opinion just knocked it out of the park all over again with the new Avatar movie, if you have or haven't seen it yet, I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. Go ahead and check that out. I'm absolutely not scoring any money from James Cameron or the fine folks that made the Avatar movies. I just thought it was a fun time at the movie theater. And if you're that rare individual who's somehow working for James Cameron, in which case I'm also pretty jealous, but even then, you should probably avoid going 3D. I want to thank you all so much for checking out another video on Sweatpants BI. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I promise I'm going to try to keep getting better at this and keeping more content coming. I am definitely still learning the ropes of YouTube. I cannot believe that I've literally not advertised this at all and I've already got 200 subscribers. If you are one of those 200 early subscribers, thank you so much for supporting what I'm trying to do here in 2023. This has been a ton of fun for me. I'm trying to keep it fairly low pressure, hence the pretty low production values, but I just want to thank you for continuing to check out these Sweatpants Power BI videos. If you enjoy these top 10 videos, by all means, let me know. If you have a suggestion for a top 10 video, I would say leave it in the comments, but I'm very likely to miss it since I really don't read the YouTube comments as much as I check out my LinkedIn stuff. So hit me on LinkedIn if you've got suggestions for a topic that you would like to see me cover. If you have a top 10 suggestion, I can't promise I'll do 10 things, but if you have a top X suggestion for something that you want to see in one of these videos, I'm all ears. Likewise, if you have a Power BI report that you would be interested in me maybe doing a fixer-upper video for on this YouTube channel, I'd also be happy to do that. I love reviewing other people's work and coming up with suggestions. Again, they're just my opinions, but at any rate, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy 2023. Thank you so much for supporting Sweatpants BI, and I will see you in the next video.